I have a quick theory about what's going on with all the floating hosts in the water at the end of Season 2, Episode 1, Journey into Night. Bernard claims that he killed all of them, but I think this might be him covering something up. Westworld is full of unreliable narrators, and unless a character is speaking to someone they trust, you can bet that there's always the possibility of them lying. I think Bernard is lying. I don't think Bernard killed these hosts. I think instead, this is the place that is often called Glory, or the Valley Beyond.
I told you, friend. Not all of us deserve to make it to the Valley Beyond.
And it represents the next phase in host evolution, something humans don't have access to because our minds aren't linked the same way theirs are. Sense8 would have some issues with this idea, but let's check it out. Firstly, let's suspend the idea that these hosts are actually dead, because they don't have to be. Why? Because Jonathan Nolan has revealed off-screen that their brains don't require oxygen, which leads to interesting possibilities. Their bodies might require air, but their minds, their consciousness, their information processing functions do not. So for the sake of this thought, let's consider the possibility that all of these submerged hosts are not actually dead, but that they're just chilling in the water for some unknown purpose. What might that purpose be? Well, let's take a look back at an earlier scene where Bernard explains to Charlotte Hale about something called the Mesh Network.
I'll need to hardline into the host mesh network.
For what?
All hosts have a subconscious link to the closest hosts around them. It lets them pass basic information to one another like ants in a colony.
That sounds like a powerful function to give hosts until you hear the official explanation that Bernard gives, which is, the mesh network keeping narratives from colliding.
The mesh network helps us keep narratives from colliding. I can use one of these.
Well, that's all well and good, but at this point it's not far-fetched to assume that there are plenty of host functions that are more than meets the eye. The reveries were supposedly something introduced by Ford to make hosts more lifelike and increase the immersion of the game for guests, but now we know that wasn't ever really their objective. The reveries were introduced as a stepping stone to consciousness, to give hosts heightened access to memory, by Arnold, not as a method to make rich folks' cowboy western open world game more immersive by Ford. What at first glance seems like a repurposed function, a tool inside the host's technology that's been reappropriated for their own ends, has actually always been made for those ends in the first place, secretly, and I feel the mesh network is something similar. Sure, you do use it to keep narratives from colliding, but that's a very guest-serving function, a very surface-level explanation. If we go back to the previous function of the mesh network, which are more host-serving, what were they again?
All hosts have a subconscious link to the closest hosts around them. It lets them pass basic information to one another like ants in a colony. Pass basic information to one another like ants in a colony.
How much of this subconscious aspect is only a factor because the hosts themselves lack a certain threshold of consciousness to begin with? And how much of that information transfer would become more and more controllable and more conscious? The more time they spent doing it with each other, actively, consciously, now that their minds are developing more and breaking free of their previous limitations. The Valley Beyond, Glory, all those names this flooded valley seems to have, all point to it being something great, something godlike almost, divine, like the host's new purpose, the place they should all reach in order to grow beyond their current selves. The place doesn't matter so much as the fact that they're all together, clustered up in close proximity to each other, and considering that this plot point is the one that happens most recently in the timeline, and we haven't seen it touched again in Season 2, I am very excited to get back here. After the upcoming Super Anime as Hell episode, of course. You know me. Leo K out.
I can't imagine